Welcome. Today's topic is algae, habitat and thallus structure. I am Dr. Divya Bharathi, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany from Sri Sharada College for Women, Salem. And we'll get into the topic today, that is algae. Algae are called as thallophytes. What are thallophytes mean? Thallophytes are plants which has undifferentiated plant body. They do not have a developed or vascular system. They don't have a vascular system. So these are called as non-vascular plants and are also called as non-vascular cryptogams or archaeophytes. The sex organ in thallophytes are unicellular and sometimes they are multicellular. In multicellular forms, they do not have a sterile covering. There are three main characters of thallophytes, that is thallus plant body, naked sex organs, and zygotic meiosis. This algae or algae or algae, these are terms which have been derived from a Latin word which is called as seaweeds. In Greek, these are called as phycos. So the study of algae is called as algology or phycology. So let's see some of the general characters of algae where habitat is the most important. So what do you mean by habitat? Habitat is the place where any organism lives is called as habitat. So algae is cosmopolitan in distribution. What do you mean by cosmopolitan? Distributed all over the place, all over the world in different climatic condition and different environmental condition. And based on the habitat of algae, algae are classified into three types, namely aquatic algae, terrestrial algae, and algae in unusual habitat. So aquatic algae, these are of two types. So what we know is that algae means these are organisms which live in water. But we've got many hidden facts to get through after knowing about aquatic algae. There are two forms of aquatic algae. One is freshwater form and other is marine water form. So freshwater algae, what does freshwater mean? These are pure water bodies such as ponds, pools, lakes, rivers, etc., where you can find different algal growth. Sometimes you can find algae growing in slow running water. And such algae are identified as Cladophora, Edogonium, Ulothrix, and Chara. And some algae grow in stagnant water, such as Chlamydomonas, Volvox, Spirogyra, Xynema, etc. Freshwater forms are found in brackish water, such as Oscillatoria, Anabina, you can find in brackish water. Next, marine algae. Marine algae are very special. These are algae which can grow in saline condition, that is in seawater. There are two main families such as Phaeophyceae and Rhodophyceae which represent themselves to be marine algae. Some examples of Phaeophyceae are Ectocarpus, Sargassum, Laminaria, Fucus, etc. And Rhodophyceae. These are also called as red algae. These red algae, example is Polysiphonia, Gracilaria, etc. These Rhodophyceae play a major role in food industry. It has high economic importance. Remember, this will be useful somewhere else. The aquatic algae are either free-floating, they are attached to a solid substratum, or with the help of a hold fast, they get attached to some places. They are called as benthos or phytobenthos. Okay, let's know about planktons. What do you know about planktons? Planktons are the first food material for any organism that live in unsea ocean or freshwater bodies. For example, these planktons move from one place to another based on the flow of water. There are two types of planktons, phytoplanktons and zooplanktons. We concentrate on phytoplanktons. Most of the phytoplanktons produce their own food. They are autotrophic in nature and they are the first source of energy for all the organisms. They are mostly members of Bacillariophyceae, blue-green algae, and these are also called as water blooms. Okay, next, we are coming out of water. That is, we saw what is freshwater forms, what is marine water forms. And now we are stepping into terrestrial algae. These are algae which can grow in moist terrestrial condition such as wet soil. Example, chlorella, euglena, oscillatoria, etc. are some of the soil floral algae. When these algae grow in soil, they are called as ephedophytes. First word, which is very different, ephedophytes are soil floral algae. Next, we've got algae to be found on the surface of the soil. They are called as saprophytes. And we can also find algae buried under the surface of the soil. Those are called as cryptophytes. And you can also find algae growing on barks of trees. These are called as corticolous algae. So algae in unusual habitat. Till now, we saw that what is aquatic algae? In aquatic, we saw about freshwater and marine water algae. We saw about terrestrial algae, and now this is something unusual even for us. So, unusual habitat. What does unusual habitat mean? You can find algae growing in haprophytic condition. That is the condition which has high percentage of salt deposition in the area. These are called as halophytes. You must have heard about the mangrove forest or the halophytic plants which grow in very high percentage of salt. And we can also find algae growing in such condition. For example, Chlamydomonas, which has a cup-shaped chloroplast, you can find it growing in an haprophytic condition. Algae are found growing in moist soil and stones. So plants growing on stones are called as lithophytic plants, and the same here, algal growing in moist rock and stones are called as lithophytic algae. And some algae grow on moist rock such as blue-green algae. Example, nostoc, Rivillaria. These organisms are very special which has high nitrogen fixation capacity. And algae are sometimes found to be growing in submerged rocky surfaces. That is, in the seashores, you can find a big rock where some will be submerged on the water and other will be exposed to atmosphere. In that type of submerged rocky surfaces, you can find different types of algae such as Ectocarpus, Polysiphonia, Gracilaria, Caulerpa, etc. Algae also grow on other organisms such as angiospermic plants, bryophytes, and sometimes even on large algae. These are called as epiphytic algae. Okay, next on the continuation of unusual algae, you can find algae growing in epizoic condition. What do you mean by epizoic? Epi means on the outer surface. So you can find algae growing on the shells of animals. That is, you can find algal growth on snails, fishes, tortoise, etc. These are called as epizoic algae. Interesting, right? Next, endozoic algae. Endo means inside. So you can also find algal growth inside the body of animals. These are called as endozoic algae. Next is the symbiotic algae. Symbiosis is the mutual relationship between two organisms. For example, lichens or lichens. These are associated with algal and fungi. And these associations are called as symbiotic algae. And can you imagine algae growing in snowy region, icy mountains, hot springs, or very high temperatures? Yes, scientists have identified algae growing in such conditions. They are called as cryptophytic algae. So, till now, whatever we saw about algae are very special, and now we've got a parasitic algae. What are parasites? These even kill the other organisms for their own living. So, there are also algae known as parasitic algae which grow on plants and animals and which destroy the other plants for its survival. Okay, till now we have analyzed what is aquatic algae, what is terrestrial algae, what are the algae in unusual habitats, how they grow, etc. To step next, we are into the range of thallus structure. The vegetative structure of algae shows wide variety and it ranges from unicellular to complex multicellular thallus. What does this mean? In algae, you can find unicellular algae and multicellular algae. That is, the complex multicellular thallus structures are being identified. That is, the size varies from 1 micron to several meters. And there are about 6 forms. Example, unicellular, multicellular, colonial, filamentous, siphoneous, and parenchymatous form. Let's see one by one. So unicellular, what does unicellular mean? Uni are single-celled organisms. So an algae which has single-celled and it performs all the vital activities of the organism, which includes even reproduction. So unicellular forms are of 4 types: rhizopoidal unicells, flagellated unicells, spiral filamentous unicells, and non-motile unicells. So rhizopoidal unicells, there is no rigid cell wall. They possess cytoplasmic projection which help in amoeboid movement. So any organism should move from one place to another in search of its food. And here these rhizopoidal unicells show a different type of movement called as amoeboid movement, where they move through the cytoplasmic projections. And there are flagellated unicells. Flagella is an organ which has been developed for the purpose of movement. And most of the algae are flagellated. And there are some exceptional such as Cyanophyceae, Phaeophyceae, and Rhodophyceae members do not have flagella. Next is the spiral filamented unicell algae. So the spiral unicell algae these are unicellular algae. They've got spirally coiled filamentous structure. Example you can find in Spirogyra. Non-motile unicells. These algae which lack flagella. So they don't have flagella for their movement. Next is the colonial form. These are aggregation, that is more than 10,000 to 40 to 50,000 cells get aggregated together, combined together by a mucilaginous sheet, and these colonies seems to be identical in structure and will be loosely associated and connected to each other. These form colonies. You can find colonies of algae in water. These are called as colonial form. Next is these colonial thallus are divided into four different types such as synovial form, palmalloid form, dendroid colonies and rhizopoidal colonies. So synovial form is the algae with an definite shape, size, number and arrangement. These are synovial. To be frank, these forms are perfect algae. Next, palmalloid colonies, that is totally opposite to synovial form, where the number of cell, their shape, size, the arrangement of cell is not definite. Next is the dendroid colonies. What do you mean by dendroid colonies? Dendrochronology. This is a common term used to study trees. So when we compare with trees, you can find microscopic tree-like structure. So the arrangement of these algae are in of microscopic tree-like structure, dendroid colonies. Next is the rhizopoidal colonies. The cells are united with the rhizopodia. It's called as rhizopoidal colonies. Next is the filamentous form. The thalli in the algae developed by repeated transverse division of cell. So what does filament mean? Filament are ribbon-like structures. When a ribbon-like structure has to form, the daughter cells will not get separated from the mother cell. They get attached, they remain attached one upon the other. So they become a filamentous structure. And these filamentous structure are divided into two main groups. That is unbranched filamentous and branched filamentous. What do you mean by unbranched? Unbranched means the algae will be free, they will be attached to some solid substratum or they will be found as colonies. Branched filamentous. Branched filaments are formed by repeated transverse division of some cells around it. That is, they further divide to form branched filaments, heterotychous branches, etc. These are called as filamentous forms. Next is the siphoneous forms. Thallus is made up of branched, aseptate, tubular filament which is multinucleated. So siphoneous form is multinucleated. They do not have a separation wall or septa between them. They are branched and they are tubular in structure. In some cases, the thallus attain large macroscopic form with a root-like rhizoid, stolon-like rhizome, and leaf-like assimilators. The thallus is cenocytic with many nuclei without any septa. So there is no septa in siphoneous form. Next is the parenchymatous form. Last, these are the flat foliose tubular thalli. These are flat structures. Cell division occurs in all the planes where daughter cells is not separated. They remain attached to the other in the form of complex parenchymatic thallus of macroscopic forms. So, to understand in simple, the cell division occurs in all the planes. Daughter cells are not separated. They are attached to the complex parenchymatous thallus. The growth of these thalli may be in the meristematic regions such as apical region, intercalary region, trichothallic regions. Okay. Till now, we have seen the habitat and range of thallus structure in algae. Just to know about reproduction, just a gist of it, reproduction happens through three types in algae, that is vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction. Vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation, where from the broken parts of the plant, new plants arise. Asexual reproduction, zoospores are motile, applanospores are non-motile. These usually grow in unfavorable conditions. Next is the sexual reproduction is of three types: isogamous, anisogamous, and oogamous. Iso means same. So the male and the female gametes are similar. Anisogamous is dissimilar. Both the gametes are different. Oogamous is that there will be a big non-motile female gamete and a small motile male gamete. And by this process, reproduction takes place in algae. And based on the study today, I've listed out few questions for you to comment the answers below, as it would be interactive and it would be a new step to get forward, to have new ideas. And thank you. Comment your answers below.